Okay, it's 4 o'clock. Welcome to the DNA program town hall. This is our third and final town hall of phase one. Um, we have all introduced the members of the executive DNA committee. We have Chuck Klein, who's our first vice president. He has been retired since July of 25th. I can never get this first sentence out, Chuck. He, he retired in July 2025 from BASF Corporation with over 29 years of service. His last position was Global Development Manager for General Insect Control, which he held for 12 years. He has a BS in entomology from Texas A&M University and an MS and PhD in livestock entomology from the University of Arkansas. We have Ann McCabe, who is our second vice president. She has a BS in geology from UCLA and an MA in education with technology emphasis from Pepperdine University. She's a high school science teacher at Culver City High. She's been teaching for 33 years and has taught chemistry, earth science, physics, integrated physical science, and integrated life science. Liz Biscuit, who is not able to join us. She had a last minute matter she had to take care of, but she is also a member of the executive committee. She is, as you all know, a former two-term ASCA president. She served in the U.S. Army 3rd Armored Division, military intelligence, electronic signal specialist. She has a BS in biology, a Master of Public Health, MA, and all but dissertation in history. She worked for labs studying muscle structure at Boston University Medical School, worked 6 years for OSHA, worked 8 years at W.M. Keck Center for Transgene Studies at the University of Notre Dame, and was a teaching assistant at the University of Georgia and is now retired. Um, Also, as our European liaison, who is also not on the call, we have Peter Hellmeister. And then myself as director and project manager for the DNA Executive Committee. I'm a business owner with a strong background in business operations, management, and accounting. So the intent of these meetings is to walk alongside the membership as ASCA prepares to transition its DNA program to VGL UC Davis. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the contents of phase one, which was sent out to the membership on December 12th as we announced our new partnership with VGL. We will address how we got here, what it all means, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. It is our intention to keep this meeting to 1 hour, and there is a lot to cover because we have some technical experts that have joined us, and we are doing multiple meetings per phase. We are trying not to take advantage of the volunteers' time in this case, so we will keep it to 1 hour. So because of that, what we're going to do is we will take questions at the end utilizing the chat feature. So if you're new to Zoom, if you hover over the bottom of your screen, there's a little chat box there. If you click on it, there will be to the right of your screen, typically there will be a column that pops up. It's a chat box. That's where you can type in your question. Anne will be managing the questions this evening. And so those will be answered and or addressed at the end of tonight, at the conclusion of tonight's presentation, barring that we have enough time to get to them. There was a Google Forms inquiry that it was a link that was sent out with all the town hall notifications where you could ask questions in advance. So if we have any of those questions, and those we will address first, and then whatever comes in terms of questions from this meeting, we will get to second. Okay, let's see. Just rest assured that we want to get to all of your questions. As you probably know, there has been established a DNA help desk where we have a joint email that the three board members on the executive committee, we are able to receive your case-specific questions there. So we urge you to continue to ask questions tonight. We will not be addressing case-specific or dog-specific questions. We can try to get to some things conceptually, but after this meeting, if this prompts you to have further questions about your dog's individual case or its status, it is best dealt with if you ask it utilizing the DNA help desk. And the way we handle that is the three of us manage it on rotation. So as the questions come in, we each respectively, the next one in the queue grabs the question. And then we also catalog all the questions and concerns because that will help us to see the trends and whatnot moving forward. Okay, so what we're going to do this evening is we're going to split this presentation up a little bit. I'm going to go through the timeline. How did we get to this point? Then Chuck will take over and he will give us some DNA facts and talk about the vocabulary that we're all going to have to get acquainted with as we continue down this path. He will also talk about our goals, where we're going with this, and then it will come back to me to discuss the logistics, and then we can talk about how we can collaborate by asking questions and whatnot. Because this is a fairly small group tonight, as we get a little bit further down the line, we may be able to have time to open it up for people to, raise their hands and ask questions as opposed to chat using the chat box, but we'll see if we can get there, if we can get there soon. Okay, so the timeline. In 2019 is when ASCA contracted with Paw Prints Genetics for DNA parentage testing. I'm going to stop and emphasize that what we are discussing this evening is DNA parentage, the requirement that ASCA has currently for breeding specimens. We are not specifically discussing tonight trait or disease panels. We will touch on that, but our objective and our discussion tonight is regarding DNA parentage of your individual dogs. When we contracted with PPG, they were using a lab called Neogen. There is a difference between a lab and a customer interface. So PPG and Oravet are not labs. They are, for lack of a better term, they are the entity in which obtains the lab results and then shares it with the members. Neogen is a lab, VGL, which is Veterinary Genetics Laboratory. They are the laboratory at the University California Davis. And so VGL is a lab and the customer interface. So there's a distinct difference. And Chuck is going to elaborate on everything I say to make it make sense to everyone here. When we contracted with PPG, in the contract, PPG provided ASCA with proprietary markers, meaning the markers are for exclusive use for ASCA and they belong to PPG, which is a very important distinction that we will make moving forward. In late 2023, early 2024, it was brought to the board's attention that Paw Prints Genetics was not doing verified parentage unless, so they were not doing it automatically. They were only doing it if it was requested, which that was a difference from what had originally been described as their deliverable to ASCA. Let's see. In March of 25, ASCA received the notice from Oravet that they had, I don't want to use the word, well, that they had essentially taken over the PPG um, business and took over the ASCA account. When the board met with them, it was, while it on the face of it looked like an acquisition or a merger, when the board met with Oravet, it was described to the board that PPG essentially was going out of business and Oravet was sort of taking it over kind of as a favor. Um, in fact, that might have even been the terminology that was used. Um, the reason we're sharing this is because it's important that the ASCA membership understands that while the board started to review the deliverables of PPG, we did not ask to have Oravet take over our account. But we did find ourselves in the middle of it, and that was the reality, and we sort of didn't have a lot of choice as they basically gave notification to the membership that we had a very small window of time to opt in. Um, Oravet promised that all data and tests from PPG would still be available to ASCA and the members, and that all members had to opt in to Oravet. Oravet at that time, which was still March 2025, said that all samples taken within 6 months would still be viable. As we started moving forward, it was determined that in order for the data to be transferred to ASCA, that Oravet would require a release form initiated by Oravet to be filled out by the members, returned back to Oravet in order for the data to get to ASCA. And I'm going to stop. There's a lot of starting and stopping. There's a in this topic. It's important for the members to understand that the members own the data. They have an account with PPG. Each member has an account with Oravet or whatever it is respectively. And moving forward, you will have an account with VGL. That data does not automatically go to ASCA because we do not have legal rights to it. So in order for ASCA to have access to that data, each member per dog has to release the data or give permission and consent for ASCA to use it. That will not change with VGL. However, it will be much, much easier because you will be able to affiliate your account and affiliate each barcode moving forward. That is something that we will discuss the logistics of how VGL is going to work in phase 3. So right now we're going to stick to phase 1. Let's see. Okay, where did I leave off? Recently, it was discovered that the PPG DNA samples were not, in fact, viable, hence so many dogs needing to be retested. Um, and let's see, I guess something else that's important to note right here that we did determine that Oravet is using the ISAG gold standard markers, which is the same type of technology that VGL is using. Before I move on, all I did was give you some facts in chronologic order. Chuck is going to explain what all of it means to you. However, I missed something in the introduction in that the reason that we have divided this whole process up into 3 phases, not only is it complicated and it's hard to take it all in one setting, but right now, the timely piece is to move as many cases through Oravet as we can, because contractually, while Oravet did not necessarily acquire PPG. According to legal counsel, they are in fact bound to the contractual agreement. So while we may not have a new contract with Oravet, according to our attorney, because they acquired our account or they are managing and have taken over our account, they are legally bound to that. So there is a term for exiting the PPG agreement, which includes a 6 month notice. So that notice has been given in December and the 6 months is ticking. So phase one is we are focused on trying to get as many cases cleared through Oravet as possible, because there will be 3 data transfers from Oravet to VGL. The first one will commence in somewhere in the middle of February, and then we will have another one in March, and then we will have the final one in April. What does that mean? The data, if your dog was tested through Oravet or if your dog was retested through Oravet, that data is transferable, and because it's using the same technology as VGL will be using moving forward. So we need to get as many case. We didn't feel comfortable waiting to the end for one transfer. We want to get as much data transferred in February as we can. That will give us some time to work out some bugs and we can continue pushing cases through. So right now, what is important to us is that we spend the next 30 days doing that. The second thing that I left out is that so VGL was an option back in 2019. It was a lab option to the board at the time when they selected PPG. It's my understanding that they went with PPG because of the technology that they were using, which is the SNP technology, which Chuck will elaborate on. And Davis, up until this point, was using STRs, which is a different kind of technology. So that is the reason that they elected at the time to go with PPG. Um, where was I getting? Okay, so VGL, though, has agreed to use the SNP technology. And in fact, they have ordered the chips. They ordered them about 6 weeks ago. But it takes time for those to be manufactured. And so the reason why VGL will not start providing services to ASCA until March is because they need to get those chips in their possession, and then they need to troubleshoot them a bit before they can offer that service to ASCA. So with that, that's probably enough information for me at this point. And now I'm going to hand you over to Chuck, and he will take it from here.
Okay, thanks, Jill. As we were putting together the agenda, we thought it would be good to kind of review the different facts and vocabulary around DNA. And I want to start out by first talking about DNA markers. And these are known sequences of DNA that are located at specific positions on chromosomes, and they can be used to identify individuals, track inheritance patterns, and associate specific genes with traits or diseases. Now, two of the DNA marker types that have been used by ASCA approved laboratories, as Jill mentioned, one of these is the short tandem repeats, and they're abbreviated as STRs. And the other one is the single nucleotide polymorphisms, which are abbreviated as SNPs. Now, the STRs are short sequences of DNA that are repeated multiple times in a row. And these sequences are analyzed to determine the number in common between a parent and offspring, and they're used to confirm parentage. STRs have been used since the early 2000s. And some of the disadvantages are they are time consuming to score. They have relatively poor reproducibility, and it may be difficult to determine parentage between two closely related sires. Now, when we talk about SNPs, these are actually variations at a single base pair in the DNA sequence, and these are the most common type of genetic variation among individuals. And these particular variations are analyzed to determine the number in common between parent and offspring and used to confirm or disprove parentage. SNPs are abundant, they're very stable, and they're amenable to high throughput scoring. And actually, the scoring is comparable between labs and platforms. Well, the main disadvantage of the SNPs are many more are required to discriminate parentage than are actually what's needed for STRs. And as I mentioned, there are two different ways of analysis, and the results are not comparable in determining parentage, which was one of the issues we had when we changed from Therion to PPG, because Therion was using the STR panels and PPG was using the SNP panels. Now, many of the labs out there are moving to SNPs, and most of the labs are using the International Society of Animal Genetics, or ISAG panels, and there are two panels that are used, and they are grouped together as ISAG 2020. And in this analyses, 232 SNPs in these two panels are analyzed when a DNA is being profiled. These profiles or these panels are in the public domain, which allows for sharing of data between labs. There are still some labs that use proprietary SNP panels, and data are not shared. And as Jill mentioned, PPG was one of those labs. They had proprietary panels, which they were not sharing outside. Another group that uses it is AKC. They also use a proprietary SNP panel, and it's exclusive to that organization. And the ISAG 2020 panels are the ones that VGL will be using to determine DNA parentage for ASCA. And as Jill mentioned, one thing we've learned is that many of the companies out there claiming to do genetic testing are just the interface with the customer. And they actually outsource the testing to a laboratory. And this outsourcing adds a whole layer of complexity to the process, because you're almost dealing with a middle person or middle group between the customer and the lab. And I want to remind everybody about the DNA CP and the DNA VP. The DNA CP is DNA certified profiled, and that's an ASCA registered Australian Shepherd who has been DNA profiled by an ASCA approved laboratory, but one or both of whose parents have not been DNA profiled by an ASCA approved laboratory. And a DNA verified parentage, or DNA VP, is an ASCA registered Australian Shepherd who has been DNA profiled by an ASCA approved laboratory and whose parents have also been DNA profiled by an ASCA approved laboratory. So that's the terminology and kind of definitions of the various DNA um, wording that you may hear. And so now I'll move on to the goals. And ASCA's had to change DNA parentage labs several times since the inception of the DNA program 30 years ago. And these changes in labs have occurred for several reasons, including poor customer service and acquisitions. And so the ASCA board of directors believed that we needed to bring stability to the program by going with a well established laboratory. And the Veterinary Genetics Laboratory, or VGL, at the University of California, Davis, was selected. And you may not know, but this laboratory has actually been around for 70 years and is considered the leading animal DNA parentage verification laboratory in the world. And for those reasons, and being a public entity that will not be acquired or go out of business, we believe they will be around for years to come, which makes them a great partner for ASCA. One thing in the works or in the planning is ASCA will create and maintain an in-house database of DNA parentage profiles so they can be easily accessed, housed in one location, and a backup to the portal maintained by VGL. And VGL will send data for each profile, which includes each of the 232 SNP markers and the alleles for that SNP in a spreadsheet, and that'll be sent to the ASCA business office on a predetermined schedule, and then those results, those data will be incorporated into this database. So that just makes sure that we have that continuity as far as being able to maintain and keep the data to be able to access it. And Jill mentioned the DNA Executive Committee, and we plan to continue this committee. It's composed of 3 board members, and then we also have several technical experts who Jill mentioned, Liz Biscuits and Peter Hellmeister. And we want to make sure that there's continuity for the program. So each of the actual board members on the committee will be up for election or coming off the board in different years so that we can actually maintain that continuity and keep the program moving forward. So that's all I've got for this evening. And I'll turn it back over to Jill.
Thanks, Chuck. Um, okay, so what are the next steps, phase one, that we sent out to the membership? Some things that you can do, but the goal with these town halls is to be able to talk them through. Not everybody just wants to read. Some people want to talk and listen and ask questions. So right now, our emphasis is to get as many outstanding Oravet cases resolved. If you have, so remember, we have a little bit of time left to move the data that comes out of Oravet. If the cases are initiated through Oravet, is usable. So there's no reason why you can't still use Oravet now. In fact, I dropped 2 samples in the mail today. I have a bitch that I co-own, and she had a litter, and I went to go register the litter and realized that the co-owner did not DNA her. So no problem. Got my kit, sent it in, and that data on that particular bitch will be part of the first data transfer. And if it's not the first data transfer, it'll be in the second or third. So that information will ultimately be moved to my VGL account and still usable for ASCA. but the data from Oravet will be sent to ASCA and my dog's DNA will be updated through that portal. So if you need to purchase tests still, if you find yourself in the same scenario I was in, then it's okay to still use Oravet. What we do recommend, though, is if this is a new test that you are, a new sample that you are submitting, please do not wait until the end of the deadline because after March, we cannot guarantee they you mail it, but it still takes them some time to get the results to you. And then the results, it takes some time to get transferred to through the ASCA portal. So please, if you have to purchase a new kit, get it in the mail. I would suggest no later than mid-March so that you give yourself 45 days before the conclusion of our agreement with PPG slash Oravet. If you, same thing goes, I know a lot of people ordered bulk kits. They purchased them at the National from Oravet. They were there. Same thing. Make sure that you get them in no later than mid-March, or you may be out of luck. There is an ability to send VGL your data one off after the transfers, but there will be a cost associated with that. So we urge you to just be timely and get it done. Um, okay. The opt-in from PPG to Oravet that has expired, so there's no opportunity to do that any longer. However, in phase two, we're going to discuss more about PPG. We're not going to spend time on that tonight because we're still trying to ferret out some options and some solutions as it relates to PPG data for people who haven't opted in. Let's see. Okay. The lion's share of the problems that we're seeing right now are the folks that have their dogs tested through Oravet, but the data has not made it to ASCA, so your dog's DNA isn't reflecting in your dog's file through ASCA in your ASCA portal. So there's a couple of things that there's some main themes here that we can help you with, and maybe you can help some friends with as well. Um, there are three main things when you go into your Oravet portal. Make sure your dog's ID number is its ASCA ID, its ASCA registration number. Most Aussies are dual registered, and the trend is people use that field for their AKC number. So make sure it's the ASCA registration number and make sure that it's accurate, including the alpha, not just numeric. So if it's a E something something, then make sure it's an E in front of the numerals. Make sure that the dog's name is spelled exactly as it reflects on the ASCA registration certificate. Make sure your ASCA ID number, that is your member number. Make sure it is in your portal, in your, I'm sorry, in your Oravet account. I will tell you that in many cases, we are getting feedback that the member will enter their ID number and save it and go back and it's not there. I am one of those people. It just happened today. Now, if that's the case, you can email Caitlin or Danielle at Oravet. I recommend at this stage, if you start communicating with Oravet directly on a problem, to copy the DNA desk so we can help push the case through and we can also catalog your case so that if we have to go in and do some last minute triage that we have the data in our database that we are building. Um, I know that Oravet can go in the back end and push your ID number through. Okay, so Those are the three pieces of data. Remember when well, let me get I'll get back to that. The data. The next thing is you have to make sure that that release form that I mentioned early on, that you fill that out. It is the OraVet release form for ASCA. You need to fill that out, send it back to OraVet. Once they have that in their files for your specific dog, each dog needs a release. You can do multiple dogs on one release form, but you cannot do one per member. So you may have to do a couple over the next, few months until we get this resolved. Make sure that the data that you put on the release form is correct. The data that is released from OraVet to ASCA is computer to computer. So they only understand the language that is written for them. So if your data is inaccurate, it will not sync or match with ASCA's data that they have on your dog. Therefore, your information will not get sent even after you release it. So all those things have to be in place in order for your dog's information to be transferred over. Let's see. What next? Okay, we've covered. Right. Let me just browse my mind really quickly to see if I've left anything out. The next I think we've got 24 minutes. And Anne, by the way, has dropped in the chat the email address for the DNA desk. It's dnadesk@asca.org. Get that somewhere in your contacts on your phone or something so that you have access to all three of us moving forward. I want to say that while we love talking to you individually and we're willing to talk with you individually, please respect our personal phone numbers. If Please don't email us case specific things to our personal emails or personal phones. Please use the Ask a DNA desk because there's a lot of cases that are outstanding and we're trying to get our arms around all of them and catalog them. So I think with that said, Anne, I don't see any questions here, but before we get to the question in the link in the link form, right? From the first meeting, you have that question.
Yes.
Do you or Chuck have anything to add? Because I'm sure I've missed something.
No, I do not. I think you covered it pretty well.
Okay, do you want to get to that first question, Anne?
Yeah, Chuck did talk about it a little bit, but this is a question that comes up again and again. So it's kind of two parts. So first of all, if you had a dog DNA'd with either Therian or paw prints, this was previous to OraVet, and the dog's information was transferred, and on their records in ASCA, it says that the dog is either DNA CP or DNA VP. That's not going away. And the fact that ASCA knows that they were profiled, those dogs can be used for breeding going forward. And so that is not an issue. That's not going to go away. The question that always comes up is that people have dogs, both parents of a litter, that were VP, say with paw prints. And they're like, well, both the parents are VP. It's like, oh, and then I sent the puppy's DNA into OraVet. Why is it not VP? Well, that is one of the things that Jillian mentioned earlier, which is any usable DNA data from paw prints is not available. And in order to get VP on any dog, there needs to be DNA that can be read, that the puppy's DNA can be compared to. Now, the good news is any dog that has been DNA'd with Oravet, that information does transfer to VGL. And so any dog that has been tested with Oravet and then in the future with VGL, their offspring can be, parentage testing can be done on their offspring, and their offspring can get VP. If a fair number of people in the last March, it's been almost a year, that we have been with Oravet have had their dogs that were previously tested with paw prints retested again with Oravet. And so therefore, we now have the DNA data going forward, and those dogs can be used to check parentage for any future offspring. But if there are dogs that have only been tested with either Therian or paw prints at this point, any of their offspring will only be CP because there is no DNA to compare it to. And so that's it. That's the biggest question that people have. Question in the chat: the DNA samples sent into PPG are no longer available to retest with Oravet, then transferred to VGL. And that is correct. As I said, if the dog's DNA was sent into ASCA from PPG and it's there, that's still going to stay there. But any DNA samples that were sent to PPG, to the best of my understanding, because it happened with my dog, I had her tested with PPG in the last October, and then in March, Oravet took over, and in April, I said, oh, hey, I want to get her tested again. And so I went, and they're like, nope, sorry, we can't use the sample from PPG. And I'm like, that was just 5 months ago. But that is a true statement. So there is no, there are no physical DNA samples that we're aware of that are able to be retested from PPG. They need to be sent in. A new test would need to be sent in to Oravet. So yeah.
It looks like we don't have any more questions in the chat, but because this is a fairly small group, if somebody wants to ask a question or further questions, you're welcome to do it using the react button. You can raise your hand now and we can call on you. It's an odd scenario using the chat for me. So I've grown accustomed to raising my hand, but it took me a while to learn how to do that. So does anybody have any questions? Oh, there is another question.
Okay. I'll read the question so everyone, if they don't have it. In the pedigree of pups that will become DNA VP, because there is no DNA on the sire in the pedigree with the parents, could possibly become, was there? Oh, got it, DNA CP. So got it. In the pedigree of the pups that will become DNA CP, because there is no DNA on the sire in the pedigree, with the pups' parents be still listed as VP because they were done with an approved lab? Correct. Once a dog is tested, like my dog was tested with Therion 10 years ago, and he got DNA VP. They stay DNA VP. Even if they never get retested, that dog will be DNA VP in the ASCA system. It's just that any offspring, if those dogs are not retested, will be DNA CP. So
I tried it. I like to share this sentiment. Your dog's DNA status in ASCA is kind of like a title. We don't take it away because, we change venues or something. So whatever your dog is listed as now, which is what would be reflected on a pedigree spooled by ASCA, that will remain. Nothing will change. Something else too, as we're talking about VP and CP, as the database begins to grow at VGL, if your dog, I don't know what the whiteboard is. I'm gonna try and close that. It's stop. It says somebody's sharing something. I don't know how to get rid of that. Um, I'm easily distracted. As the database grows with VGL, some people will elect to test their dog again, right? And let's hypothetically say that your dog is CP today because the sire is in there, but the dam is not. If the dam is added, once you have that knowledge, you are able to get an updated verification from VGL. We are not at the point with them that we can discuss every little teeny tiny scenario, but we will moving forward. That's why it's important that we start talking to the membership as a community now, because once we get to, I just got access to the ASCA My VGL account today so that we can make sure that it's set up appropriate. And I haven't even gotten in there yet. But moving forward, as we start working with VGL, we will be able to talk to them more directly about these scenarios and the best way to handle them. And then again, as they start populating the VGL database, we can then speak with more education on dog specific matters. I had someone call me yesterday about a deceased sire and so on. It's really tough for us to start speaking to our lab partner without actually conducting business yet. So we're not quite there. We will begin. We're sending them some sample data, some samples for them to work with over the next month or so. But we will have a lot more answers upcoming.
Another question. Will VGL be able to DNA test what DNA is left in the syringe after an AI for people with frozen semen on very old dogs with very little semen left? That is a technical question for the exact amount of semen that VGL would need to run a test, and I do not have that amount. And so that would be a question for us to ask the VGL. And so we will do that.
Linda's the only one with questions, you guys. She's beating you all. We've got 11 more minutes. Anybody else have any other questions? Linda, question?
Let's see. So repeat the approximate time frame when the new VGL lab starts. If we are not in a hurry, should we just wait or do it with Oravet now? We're looking at middle to the end of March. Is that correct, Jillian? Is that our time frame?
Right. Bear in mind that even though they could send out swabs right now. They don't want your samples sitting around waiting for those chips. And you know how manufacturing goes. They want to have those chips in their hot little hands and they want to sample them, right? They want to troubleshoot them before they start firing on them. So I would say if you can wait, Linda, um, as I mentioned earlier, I don't know if you were on the call at that time, but if you have a bitch that has a litter now, just use VGL or use Oravet. But once it starts getting close to the middle of March, you really need to wait. It's in your best interest to wait so that you don't get accidentally missed. Something else that is probably important for people to know is the way VGL works, which is a little bit different than Oravet, is that they're all about accuracy. And so it will take a little bit longer with VGL than it does with Oravet and it did with PPG because they test in groups of I think it is 24, Chuck. Is that right? So they don't just do one-off samples. And when we spoke to the doctors there, it was quite impressive, by the way. They're not interested in speed, they're interested in accuracy. And he said 99.9% accuracy is not good enough. So this is another reason that we went with VGL. You know, if you think about it, there's very little customer service required if you do it right the first time. You have very few disgruntled customers.
Okay, so if I just need a litter healer and both parents were done with PPG, what would you suggest? Oravet has verified the parents' results in my account. Bred a litter and both parents done with PPG. So let's see, bred a litter 2 months. And we're looking January, March. That right. The fact that Oravet, quote unquote, verified the results in the account is that they have them. They have what PPG sent them. And if you print out if you download a PDF of your dog's results and scroll through it all, at the bottom are the PPG results, which is a bunch of A's and B's that don't mean anything to any other lab. So kind of the same thing that Linda Catalino asked earlier, which was it's just your timing. That if you want to have those puppies DNA VP, then both parents' samples need to be sent to either Oravet or VGL. So it's up to you in timing. We still do have another, excuse me, month and a half or so when Oravet will be taking samples and analyzing them, or you can wait. Or if you don't necessarily want VP on the puppies, then when the puppies are born, you send in the samples and they'll be DNA CP, and their offspring going forward can then have VP. So at this point, it's kind of a personal timing thing. As we said, one of our focuses and what we want to hear from you is things that are unresolved with Oravet now. What the backlog is now, how we can help you now if there are issues with Oravet that are backlogged, that are from before. So that is our focus now.
I want to jump in really quick
Mhm.
because Linda made added a statement in here that the reason PPG was chosen was because it was a one-stop shop for DNA and disease testing. That's not the only reason, because that's one of the reasons why we involved Liz Biscuits in this to help us with some historical information. That is true, but it's also because of the technology that they were using, which is why they can accomplish that. Just for everybody's knowledge, even though I pointed out in the beginning that this conversation is in reference to DNA parentage, what I mean by that is when we start talking about transferable data and things of that nature, VGL also has a health panel for Aussies that will be offered to ASCA. And we, in answer to Linda's question, it's not really much more expensive. It might even be $1. It's right around the same price right now for the DNA parentage, but you do get a discount if you do more than one dog. So that information will be disseminated in phase 3 when we talk about the logistics of setting things up and what's available to you and all the members. I do recommend that if you have some time, peruse the VGL website. It's just jam-packed with data. And they are a very impressive lot over there. And they are growing and already asking me if they can expand on some health testing and if we can get some affected dogs and some samples and whatnot. So they are thrilled to pieces to be working with our organization. Okay, we got 3 more minutes. Anything else, or do y'all want to end early? Chuck, Ann, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't.
I don't think, let's see. Um,
I don't
got,
recommend that you open an account right now.
Yep.
as we said, like, I think we're looking at middle to end of March to open accounts with VGL, and we will do the announcements all over the place that you can open your accounts with VGL, because part of it is that with your accounts that we're going to have the data transfer that we have to deal with, which is what we're going to talk about in phase 2. So that is an added part of it, but we will, as we always say, all the usual outlets, and let everyone know when you can set up an account with VGL.
Just another thing to bear in mind is that VGL typically uses STRs. So if you were to order, you could order a DNA kit today, but it won't be usable and transferable into the ASCA database. So we're just, in the interest, out of abundance of caution, we don't want anyone to prematurely set up an account and start ordering things because you will ultimately end up having to retest your dog when they get the SNP chips. So, and for anybody who already has an account with VGL, that typically is not going to be an ASCA person that did a DNA parentage test, but maybe your health or trait tests or whatever. That's perfectly fine. What will happen is ultimately you will need to affiliate your personal account with ASCA, and we're just in the beginning process of working with them. So bear in mind, we have a memo of understanding in place with them, but we are not currently yet working with VGL. We still have a lot of balls in the air. They need to get their chips. We need to make sure that the way they set up our account is accurate. But it's a lot of moving parts and pieces at the same time. But our mindset on this committee is to take our time and to do it right and be efficient and be as communicative as we can with the memberships with the membership, ask questions, and we're going to do this one final time on behalf of ASCA and get ourselves in a position to where we never have to do this again. Okay, any final questions? I am sorry for whomever just signed on, but we are at the end of our, thank you, Leslie. She's
Mhm.
clapping. We are at the end of our presentation. Remember, in February, we will have phase two. There'll be three more offerings. It is our intent to have phase one transcribed by our fabulous slash fantastic Kala Jaco. She will transcribe all three meetings and combine them together and make that available to yourselves as like a crib sheet, but also to the members who were unable to join us. And we encourage you, if you find this useful, please share the information with your friends. Maybe we'll get a better attendance in phase two. But this thing is going to creep up, and we're doing our best to communicate, but we need your help. And we appreciate your questions because that's how we collaborate with the membership on your needs. And you may have some case specific things that we haven't talked about, but that ASCA help desk is there for just those occasions. So thank you guys all so much for joining and taking your time out tonight. And we hope you're enjoying this new way of communicating with the members. We're hoping to use the town halls for other things, but this is a very, very pressing matter for all of us. So with that, we're going to sign off and we thank you so very much. And we'll hope to see you on phase two.
Mhm.